deep into darkness. There will be no more stories after this one.
What is she doing? Why is she doing this? They're watching. Why doesn't she turn coming?
I've always had a major soft spot for Ninja Theory. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like the so-called AAA video game industry is quite as fond of it as I am, since the developer has always come out on the losing end of its partnerships with major publishers. Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, might have a really bad name, but it represents Ninja Theory doing the wise thing and trying to break away from that cycle of big budget publishing, developing what they've billed as an indie AAA game. Sounds a bit bollocks, doesn't it? But I do respect what they're aiming for, something that's half the price of a premium retail game, while aiming to offer the same level of production value and content. A game with a modest budget that retains the main event feel of whatever you'd find from the EAs and Ubisofts of the world. It's an admirable ambition, and at times Ninja Theory comes close to achieving it. Even better, it dabbles in themes and narratives that you just wouldn't find in a major game. It would be too controversial, or the executives would water it down into something stereotypical and tacky. Freed from the shackles of the besuited executives, Ninja Theory's been able to tell its own story, and it's done so with unnerving sincerity.
I know it from the wilds. It's coming back for me.
The titular Senua journeys to the land of the dead in order to rescue her love, in a universe dripping with Norse mythology. This journey would be dark and intimidating in its own right, but it's made worse for the protagonist due to the fact that she suffers from psychosis. Ninja Theory has worked with experts as well as those who deal with psychosis personally, and the research shows. Senua's mind is filled with many whispering, unseen voices. Sometimes they encourage her, sometimes they warn her, oftentimes they put her down and try to make her feel as disheartened as possible.
And nothing is the same ever again. Senua has died. And she will do so again. You can be sure of that.
With voices coming in from all sides, Senua very much feels like she's beset upon. Like there's no escaping, like she's constantly being watched, like everything she does is being commented on. Coupled with the haunting things Senua sees, Hellblade is a daunting, unnerving, creepy as heck game. Ever ambiguous as to what's really there or what's just going on inside Senua's mind. Hellblade combines stretches of walking, puzzles, and combat in order to craft its narrative. An 8 to 10 hour journey through the world of death, filled with skeletal assailants, cackling gods, and scads of hidden lore. Combat is small in scale, and at first it seems a little bit limited, but that's only until you grasp quite how claustrophobic and nerve-wracking it can be. Enemies only attack in small numbers, but the swordplay is so personal that just 2 enemies can sometimes feel overwhelming, with a camera that remains tightly focused on Senua and whoever it is she's trying to fight at the time. Other involved enemies will strike from behind quite happily, and players have to be constantly aware, trying to keep enemies in focus as much as possible, maneuvering so she can keep an eye on the whole battlefield, and of course listening to the voices in her head, which sometimes act as the only means of defense against enemies trying to score a cheap shot. Combat is nerve-wracking, but thanks to some beautiful animations and a real heavy, precise feel to the way swords are swung, every battle is immediately absorbing. And despite a stock standard system with your light attacks and your heavy attacks and a punt and a block, the tactical edge brought about as a necessity by that aforementioned claustrophobia lends it a sense of involvement that other action games fail to achieve. Sword slashes feel truly vicious, and there's a real elegance to the way Senua dodges attacks, counters, blocks. Every little detail and movement looks utterly gorgeous in its own violent way. That said, the camera, while it can help make combat feel involving, doesn't always help, sometimes getting stuck behind a wall while you're trying to see what the hell's going on. The perspective can sometimes make it hard to see whether you're in attack range as well. Often I'll be swinging in mid-air because I thought the enemy was just a scooch closer than it actually was. When not fighting for her life, Senua is either walking from point A to point B, or solving puzzles that range from the clever to the utterly mind-numbingly awful. The worst offenders are a series of rune puzzles, where you have to find certain runic shapes in the environment and focus on them. While these puzzles are for the most part inoffensive, some of the more sprawling areas have runes hidden in highly detailed environments that sometimes just feel impossible to spot. Even when the game's letting you know you're in the right position, actually seeing the shape is another battle. For the more obtuse ones, Senua sometimes just accidentally found them before I had any clue what I was looking at. These moments really bog the pace of the game down as you stop getting involved, as you stop listening to the spooky voices, as you stop feeling like you're fighting for your life, and start playing scavenger hunt and match the shapes. Contrasting those puzzles are ones that could actually be called clever and inventive. Hindrances involving illusions and magical doorways that change the layout of the environment are remarkably well designed. And at one point, Senua faces a series of trials that involve stealth, navigating environments by manipulating 2 different time periods, and what I think is the ghost of a fire that's chasing her about, and it's really, really scary.
What should I do?
A consistent thing about every aspect of the game is how it gets better the further you go. At first the combat feels a little too rudimentary. At first the puzzles are a little bit obtuse. At first the walking and talking is more of a distraction. But all these elements get more involving, they get deeper, they become more elegantly woven into the overall atmosphere. And despite the sometimes wonky camera and a number of clipping issues, it's a gorgeous looking game to boot. Beautiful in a dark and bleak sense, and sometimes filled with nightmarish, ghoulish imagery that gives even Silent Hill a run for its money.
You cannot escape the darkness. Your curse will make everyone suffer. You will have blood on your hands!
Now all of this is good. It's better than good, it's great, in fact. I want to climb on top of a mountain and sing this game's praises to the heavens, but I can't quite do that because unfortunately, due to what seems like a freak accident and a horrible glitch that resulted as a result of it, I can't quite get to the end of this bugger. It was a simple enough puzzle. Stay in the light or get killed in the dark. And the torch Senua was carrying, of course, has varied and nasty ways of going out. In one particular section, I missed a flame with which to relight the torch and carried on running because, well, this game is scary as hell. My mistake, but upon dying in this area, everything went to hell. At one point, the darkness in the tunnel stopped being lethal and I could just saunter my way to the next source of light, and unfortunately, the game was autosaving behind me. Autosaving behind me in such a way as to maroon me in the dark. I was caught in this one little bit of sunlight. Couldn't go back because Senua wasn't fast enough to get anywhere without dying in the dark. Couldn't go forward for the exact same reason. I've diddled and fiddled and fidgeted and experimented and died a lot, over and over again, trying to work out how to get around this, how to get through this, and how to listen to Senua's death screams without wanting to jam a pair of knitting needles in my friggin' ears. The fruits of my labour are dry, saggy, and full of maggots. Basically, I'm saying I'm completely effed in the A here. And it's infuriating. Absolutely infuriating, not just because the game itself was getting consistently better, more involving, more engrossing. Not only was I more desperate than ever to see this through to the end, but on the meta level, I really wanted to praise this game, not just because I really enjoyed the story and the combat, but because I 100% believe in what Ninja Theory is doing with this as a product. I completely am behind the idea of what they call an indie AAA. I don't like that it's called indie AAA, that just sounds weird. But the mid-tier game, the middle shelf game, the mid-budget game, that's something I've wanted to see come back for years, and it's finally here, and I can't see the end credits of it. My initial response to this frustration, as some of you will know, was to give this game a 1. Which would put it on the same level as a game like Life of Black Tiger. Considering the otherwise good quality of the game, and considering I got at least 7 enjoyable hours out of it, on reflection, that didn't seem entirely fair. On the other hand, it feels disingenuous to write off my own personal experience, because my own personal experience is the only thing I have to review. I'm not reviewing your experience of the game, and I'm not reviewing what I think the game might be. For me, this is a fairly unprecedented situation. I've never played a game that was so consistently good and consistently getting better, only to have it stonewall me. Now, I've played buggy, broken, borderline unplayable games, and Senua's Sacrifice is not that, and in fact the glitch seems so rare that I may have been the only person to ever trigger it. Maybe I'll be the only person in history who ever will, which more or less puts this review in the same unwinnable situation that my current save file's in. That's an issue in and of itself. There is only one save file, and it auto-saves, there's no manual saving. This seems tied into another gameplay conceit that Ninja Theory hasn't been promoting pre-launch, and I think it probably should. I think customers should be made aware beforehand that the game features permanent death, at least after a fashion. The game warns you that your save file will be deleted if you fall too many times and the rot that's infecting Senua's arm travels up to her brain piece. And if the thought of permadeath worries you, I wouldn't be too frantic about it. The game's actually fairly forgiving in that department, and battle, while it can be intense and hectic, it is manageable and it gives you plenty of tools and opportunities to defend yourself. The more common way to die isn't even in battle, but in various traps and puzzles that have insta-kill lose conditions attached to them, like the aforementioned ghostly fire that will just immolate you on contact. And even then, you can take a whack and still get up. When I was stuck rolling around screaming in the glitch zone, I died over and over and over and over again. And look, I don't want to definitively spoil anything, so all I can say is just don't worry about it, just chill with it. It's fine, you'll be fine. You'll be okay. At any rate, it didn't take long after receiving the permadeath warning to sort of not worry about it. It seems to exist more as a threat than something that's got any actual teeth to it. I don't want to get into spoiler territory, but let's just say do not worry about permadeath too much if that's a turn off for you. At least up until the point where my own progress had to halt, I never felt like I was at risk of losing my progress to this rot. And so we come to the matter of the score, which for this one has been particularly tricky. I'll make no bones about the fact that I overreacted and was petty and angry when I initially published a review on this and slapped that 1 on it. Not my proudest professional moment, if I'm perfectly honest with you, and I do feel that I am humble and of course wonderful enough to admit that. But at the same time, again, I can't ignore what I went through. I'd love to give this game an 8, maybe even a 9, the more I think about it, the more I think about what this game's accomplished. But to do so would include an idealistic bent based on things that I just haven't experienced. What I have experienced is at least 7 hours of good quality gameplay that was scuppered by the worst luck imaginable and the unfortunate decision to do the whole single save file autosave structure. So I'll tell you what I'll do. And this is, after much thought and deliberation, the fairest I think I can do it. I can't give it that lofty 8, I can't give it that loftier 9, but even with the game ending the way it is, I have to admit that it was a good bloody time, and there are a lot more expensive games out there that offer a lot less. So a point for every hour I had fun. How about that? And it's only because Hellblade was that bloody good.
Seven. Good